Hello and welcome. Today's unit we're going to be talking about weight management in athletics. We'll talk about both some weight gain techniques and also some weight loss techniques that can be used by our athletes. So first thing we want to kind of understand is this concept of energy balance. So when we think about energy balance, again, we're basically trying to understand the relationship between calories in and calories out. Okay, so the state at which energy intake in the form of food, alcohol, different drinks, etc., matches the energy expended. And this will be primarily through basal metabolism and also physical activity calories. Okay, so again, this is certainly going to influence the amount of energy that we store, and our storage form, again, if we consume too many calories, will be stored in our triglycerides or our fat cells. And also, again, we want to understand this idea of balance. So being able to maintain our weight means that we're able to balance the amount of calories that we're bringing in and the amount of calories that we're expending over many, many days period of time. So we talked about energy balance. We want to take a look at negative energy balance and positive energy balance. And in my mind, these are kind of opposites of what I would expect. So negative energy balance is basically when I am expending more calories than I'm taking in. So again, think about this like your bank account. If I put in less money than what I'm spending, I'm going to have a negative balance. So negative energy balance will result in weight loss. So I'm expending more calories than I'm bringing in. And when we lose weight or we have this kind of net negative energy balance, it will generally consist of both lean body mass and adipose tissue. Again, if we're interested in really losing a quality amount of weight, there's ways in which we can try to kind of minimize our weight loss of the lean mass and kind of maximize our weight loss as it relates to that adipose tissue. A positive energy balance, again, positive makes me think that it sounds good, but in reality, positive energy balance means that we're gaining weight. So when we think about positive energy balance, again, think about your bank account. If I'm putting more in than I'm expending, then I'm able to store money, which is positive. That'll result in a positive bank account or weight gain in this particular example. So again, when we think about positive energy balance, in what situations is positive energy balance a good thing? Certainly if we're working with adolescent athletes, so we're working with younger athletes, they're going to be gaining weight as they continue to grow. If you have an athlete who is interested in gaining weight, maybe they're a football player or something along those lines, and they want to gain some muscle mass, positive energy balance would be good for them. If you were to work with a pregnant athlete, for example, if you're working with adult athletes, that would be another positive time for us to have a positive energy balance. So again, those are just some examples of when it would be appropriate to have this positive energy balance. So let's start with understanding some weight gain recommendations for athletes. So in order for us to have our athletes gain weight, they need to consistently consume additional quality calories. And again, I have quality kind of bold here in capital letters because I think that's really a key here. When we think about weight gain recommendations for our athletes, a lot of times there's this misconception that, oh, I want to gain weight, so I just need to eat a lot. I need to eat a lot more. Yes, that's true, but let's make sure that what we're consuming is quality calories, because if I want to gain weight, I'm hoping that it's muscle mass and not just a bunch of fat mass. There's not a lot of sports where having more fat mass is going to be to my benefit. Now, certainly if I am a lineman in football or a thrower in track and field, for example, or maybe a heavyweight wrestler, just in general having more mass is good. But again, if I could choose between having more fat mass and more muscle mass, I'm going to choose more muscle mass. So again, it's important for us to think about how can we build quality weight? How can we build quality calories within the body? Okay. So what does this person need to do? They need to make sure they're consuming adequate amounts of protein. Again, 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram per day. That's not more than our standard recommendations, right? So again, adequate protein, but they don't need to necessarily overconsume protein. Like they don't need to be going crazy with the protein. Okay, they need to maintain or increase resistance training. So again, we can talk about how many days a week they want to do resistance training. Let's say they were doing 2 days before. Well, let's bump them up to 3. Let's bump them up to 4 days. So we can use progressive overload in order to kind of increase the amount of resistance training volume that they're doing on a weekly basis. We can try to consume more calorie dense foods and beverages, and I have some examples on the next slide that will kind of show us some examples of what some good options might be for us to get those extra calories. High calorie snacks, so again, this type of person might be kind of constantly munching on some sort of snacks, and then pre and post workout snacks as well. Okay, so again, I have some good examples of quality foods that these individuals can be consuming, but again, we want to just focus on a general healthy diet with more calories. Okay, so again, we want to create a positive energy balance somewhere between 300 to 500 excess calories per day. So again, that's the appropriate amount that would allow this person to gain not quite, 1 pound per week. Again, you're looking at maybe 3 to 4 pounds a month or so if we're creating this positive energy balance of 300 to 500 calories per day. Again, liquid calories are great, so something like juices, smoothies, chocolate milk, sports drinks, again, those are a good way for us to, get some of those extra calories in. Okay, so ideas for adding extra fuel in your meal plan. So again, you can add, sliced avocado or guacamole. So again, those are high in calories, but healthy calories. So that's good. Smoothies and sandwiches are good. Nuts and nut butters, that can be added to toasts, fruit, smoothies. Trail mix is a great source of a lot of calories as well. You can add olive oil to your vegetables. So again, those oils are healthy fats, but high in calories. You can add other oils to foods. Again, we want to focus on like your olive oils are healthy fats, to meat and potatoes as well. Bagels instead of bread, that could be a little bit of more calories in those as well. Drink 2% or chocolate milk is a good way for us to get extra calories in. Dried fruit, granola, those are also good options for us in terms of kind of adding in those extra calories. Other tips for gaining weight. So again, we want to complete strength training, work your way up. So use that principle of progressive overload. And if you're doing 2 days a week, let's go up to 3. If you're doing 3 days a week, let's go up to 4. So, really up to 5 days a week of quality strength training. We can do 48 hours between our hard lifting sessions to allow our muscles to repair and recover. So again, if I'm doing 5 days a week, that gives me some opportunities to have some either easier lifts in there, or I can really do a split complex and do, a leg heavy day on one day and an upper body day, or do a different split where you do, push complex and then a pull complex or something like that. So you're doing anterior chain, posterior chain exercises. Again, I would love to get into all of those details, not in this class though. We'll try to focus more on the nutritional side of things with weight gain and weight loss. But again, when we think about, what we need to be doing in the weight room, we can follow the muscular hypertrophy guidelines set out by NSCA. And in those guidelines, again, we want to shoot for a higher intensity, very minimal rest. So 30 seconds to 1.5 minute rest between our sets, 6 to 12 reps, and then 3 to 6 sets total per exercise. Again, hitting all major muscle groups. So again, we want to do some of those big complex movements, multi-joint, so squats, deadlifts, bench press if you're working with athletes that feel comfortable doing movements such as snatch, clean. Those types of exercises are also great to really activate a large amount of muscle mass, which will allow us to need to repair that muscle mass. So the more muscle I can activate, the more muscle I break down, the more muscle I repair, the greater the potential for growth in those particular muscles that I've activated. So again, we've talked just briefly about weight gain, and I'll give you some opportunities in your next discussion post, I believe, to kind of look into some more examples of what we would need to do in order to gain weight appropriately. So now we want to look at, is that a bad thing, right? So energy imbalance. So creating this chronic positive energy balance can be good if we're interested in weight gain and we are eating the healthy high density calories and we're doing the strength training and we're building muscle mass, that's great. But if we're using this chronic positive energy balance and not doing the activity, over time, this can certainly result in obesity. And obesity can be accurately diagnosed based on body fat percentage. That'd be a better method in comparison to BMI. BMI tells us just the ratio of weight to height. Okay, so all that tells us is basically how dense your body is. It doesn't tell us anything about what the composition is. Body composition tells us what percentage fat you have. So it's a more accurate indicator of, if your weight is healthy or not. Okay, so if we have the option to look at body composition or body fat percentage, that's a better option in comparison to just simply looking at BMI. Okay. A high body fat percentage is linked to an increased risk for many health problems, so that can be problematic for us. Again, our first priority is always to keep our athletes healthy. Okay, so we want to keep our athletes healthy, and then secondary, we want to focus on improving their performance. So again, we got to focus on those health aspects first. And so if a high body fat percentage puts us at risk for many health problems, then that can be problematic for us, for our athletes. Body fat distribution is also important when we think about predictor of health risks and other issues as well. So again, we want to understand where that body fat is stored. So adipose fat, so storing fat in our stomach area can certainly be problematic for individuals because that puts us at a risk for type 2 diabetes, other cardiovascular issues, stroke, etc., cancers. So again, we'll talk about body fat distribution a little bit later and kind of understanding why that's important. So again, we kind of already mentioned this, but what is body composition? So again, we're looking at that ratio of fat mass to fat-free mass. So again, we're just basically looking at what percentage body fat do they have. So your fat-free mass is made up of bones, muscles, connective tissue, and organs. And then our fat mass is made up of two different types of fat. So we have essential fat and non-essential fat. Essential fat is the fat that I need. It's the minimum amount of fat that I need in order to maintain my basic physiological function, such as reproduction, for example. Okay, so males need to be at least 3%, females need to be at least 12%. If I dip below that 12% mark, there is a great likelihood that I will not be able to maintain my normal reproductive potential, right? So as a female, the menstrual cycle might go away, or it can be very irregular in nature. So again, that's a great indication for us that that individual's body fat is too low and they wouldn't be able to complete reproduction. And again, that's a great sign for us that this person isn't within the healthy ranges. Okay, for males, again, it's a little bit less, only 3% for males. So again, what is that fat used for? We need that 3% fat in order to cushion our vital organs. So within our thoracic cavity, we've got a little bit of fat around some of those organs, and that'll help them to not be like jostling around and causing abrasion against each other. So that's important. Essential fat is also used within the cell membranes. And so, that's one of the components of the cell membrane. So if I don't have fat, I can't make cell membranes. So again, that would certainly affect my general function as well. Again, the reason that females are going to have more than males is for those reproductive processes. So again, I need to have enough fat that if I were to become pregnant, I'm able to fuel that baby with fat if I need to, if I got myself in a situation where I didn't have access to the appropriate nutrients, something like that. So again, think survival there. The other reason is when a female goes into childbirth, again, I need to have enough fuel stored so that I can do this really hard thing, right? So I think the average female, the first time mother, is in labor for like 23 hours or something crazy like that. So again, imagine this time where a female needs to expend all these calories, right? So we need to have enough fat stored in order to provide ourselves with the fuel needed if the labor were to take that long. And they don't give you any food when you're in labor. I remember with my twins, my labor was super short, but with my son, who is older, he's 3 years older than the girls, we went in like the middle of the night. It was probably like 3 a.m. or something like that. And by like 5 a.m., which is what time I normally get up, I was like starving, and they would not give me any food or anything. All they would give me is water. So again, it's important that you have enough fat stored because they're not going to give you food while you're in labor or any type of calories. So there's my story there. Non-essential fat is our fat that's above and beyond those essential levels. So again, that non-essential fat is just kind of extra. So again, it can serve as an extra fuel source for us. But again, if we have too much of this non-essential fat, that'll put us at risk for many, chronic health conditions. This is just interesting, and I think that this is a good chart to look at. So again, this shows us what average body composition or body fat percentages are for males versus females. Both of these charts are set up for college-aged population. So again, as you get older, we'll see these levels kind of creep up in terms of the normals. So the top chart here, we've got ACSM, normal for females 22 to 25%, for males 15 to 18%. Again, you look at ACE, so that's just a different governing body, and the ACE guidelines, again, fitness level 21 to 24, 14 to 17% for males. So again, really comparable in terms of how they kind of set these standards, but just wanted you to be aware that there are many different standards that you could look at out there to kind of figure out, what is normal for an athlete or for any individual. This I also thought was interesting. So this just looks at average body fat percentage for athletes. Again, this is based on college-aged athletes. Here you can see gymnastics, for example, the males are 5 to 12%, females are generally 10 to 16%. You go over to tennis and again, look at how those differ. Let's look at something like, I don't know, shot put, for example. So 16 to 20% for the males, 20 to 28% for the females. Not something that I'm going to test you on, just wanted you to understand that when we think about the dynamics of a particular sport and what that athlete looks like, right? There are different ranges that are appropriate for different types of athletes, right? Depending on the demands of that particular sport. So I think that that's super interesting when we think about success in our individual sports. Interesting to take a look at these. Okay. So again, we've kind of alluded to this concept of BMI versus body composition or body fat percentage. BMI is okay. So BMI, again, like we said, is just a ratio of your height to your weight. And that's a pretty good measure for the average person. So again, it will classify people as overweight, normal weight, underweight. But if you're working with athletes, BMI is not super accurate because generally athletes are going to have more muscle mass in comparison to fat mass. And so muscle weighs more than fat. So, usually, and I see this more in our male athletes, particularly, someone that's like a wrestler or a football player or something like that who maybe has a large amount of muscle mass. Maybe they're not very tall. Okay, so again, they might have very, very low body fat percentage, but when we look at their BMI, it'll tell them that they're overweight or even obese. Okay, so again, a lot of muscular men will be ranked as overweight or obese on the BMI scale. So again, when we look at individuals that are regularly active, such as our athletes, BMI is not super accurate. So it would be better to use body fat percentage as an appropriate or accurate measure of their general fitness. Okay. There's lots of ways to measure body composition. So again, you could use skin folds if you were skilled enough to do so. Again, an athletic trainer might be able to do that for you as well if you have access to that type of person. They're fairly cheap, pretty easy to do. Again, you have to have some skill level in order to appropriately measure those skin folds. We could use this like in intervals of our training. We could look at somebody's body fat percentage at the beginning of the season or preseason, beginning of the season, the championship season, something along those lines to kind of track our athletes' progress. That's an option. Lots of other ways we could measure this. You could do like a bioelectrical impedance that takes no skill. They're not super expensive either. You can get one for like $80. And it's basically like a little handheld thing, and it sends this like electrical current through your body. It doesn't hurt or anything. You can't feel it. And it basically looks at how fast that signal is sent through the body. And again, it will move quickly through muscle because your muscle has fluid in it. So the water mass, it flows quickly through the water mass, but it flows slowly through fat. So if I have a lot of fat, the signal moves very slow. because the signal doesn't move very easily through fat mass. So again, the machine will basically calculate your body fat percentage based on the speed of the current through the body. Okay. So again, that's another kind of cheap, easy option if you're interested in kind of tracking your athlete's progress or kind of understanding where they're at. This is just, I thought this was kind of an interesting thing. So this just shows you the difference between looking at BMI versus looking at body fat percentage. So again, you can see in 2009, this lady, and again, I got this, I think, off of like Pinterest or something like that. But again, in 2009, she was 63 kilograms, and look at how much more fit she looks as a 66 kilogram person 4 years later. So again, we look at, weight is just a number. How much you weigh is just a number. There are many better predictors for us as it relates to kind of health and fitness as well. So again, she looks much more fit in 2013, and her body fat percentage is probably significantly lower in that picture in comparison to when she was 3 kilograms lighter in 2009. So again, nothing that I'll test you on or anything. I just thought this was kind of an interesting way to kind of look at progression when we think about body weight versus body comp, body fat percentage. So when we think about energy output, so again, we've talked about calories in versus calories out. So calories in are the calories that we're consuming. Energy output, the calories that we expend, are made up of 3 different components. So number 1 is resting metabolic rate, or basal metabolism. Okay, and this represents the minimum energy expended in a fasting state to keep the body alive in a warm and quiet environment. Okay, our resting metabolism, or our basal metabolic rate, represents 60 to 70% of total energy use, and it's used for processes such as maintaining heartbeat, respiration, and temperature. Okay, so again, this is just basically the energy that I need in order to keep myself alive. That's the resting metabolism or basal metabolic rate. Those terms can be used interchangeably for purposes in our class. Okay. The second component is energy for physical activity, and this will account for 25 to 40% of total energy expenditure, and this can be exercise, but it can also just be physical activity. So the difference between exercise and physical activity: exercise is like, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go run for 30 minutes or whatever. Okay, so again, I might burn 300 calories during that 30-minute run. So that's the amount of calories that I burnt during that exercise. Physical activity is any activity above and beyond just me sitting at my desk. So for example, let's say you have an athlete who is also a waitress. Okay, so again, maybe she comes to basketball practice on Saturday morning, and then she goes into Jerry's restaurant and she works all day. Okay, and let's say she's got her watch on or whatever, and she walked 7 miles or something while she was working. Okay, just running around. They were busy that day, and so she got a lot of steps in doing her job. Okay, so again, she burned a lot of calories during that work shift. That's physical activity, not exercise. So again, we can think about, some of these people, their part-time jobs and things like that, or just their day-to-day life. They're going to maybe need more calories because of the activity that they do throughout their job. The high school that I work at, Western Dubuque, I have a ton of farm kids. So it's a rural area, and a lot of farm kids. So again, I'll have a lot of my athletes, they have been up since 5 a.m. They went and milked the cows or whatever. Then they came to school all day. Then they're going to come to track practice, and then they're going to get home and have to do more chores at the farm, right? So again, they're burning a ton of calories just from the kind of manual labor of helping their folks out on the farm. So again, think about those components when we think about one of our athletes, their whole day. What are they burning in the whole day? Okay. And then lastly, our third component is thermic effect of food, and this will account for 5 to 10% of our total energy expenditure. And thermic effect of food is basically the energy investment that I need in order to break down the food that I've consumed. Okay, so again, if I eat something like a bunch of raw broccoli, for example, that's going to require me to invest quite a bit of energy in order for me to break that food down. Proteins are really pretty challenging for us to break down. So like a lean chicken breast, for example, will have a high thermic effect. Okay, so again, it requires a pretty hefty energy investment in order for us to break down that food. One kind of final component that's not listed as one of these three but can contribute a little bit to our energy expenditure is fidgeting. Fidgeting represents another minor form of energy output. This is sometimes called non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So this particular, component, there's a lot of people that just, they can't sit still, right? They're always tapping their toe, or they're always playing with their hair, or they're always, doing something. They can't quite sit still. Those people are burning just a little bit of calories through those fidgeting mechanisms. And our research actually shows that people that are fidgety tend to be leaner than people that are not fidgety. And again, that makes sense. Let's say I burnt, I don't know, 80 calories a day because I gotta keep tapping my toe. If that accounts for 80 calories a day, day after day, week after week, that can add up to a significant amount of calories over time. So what are some factors that are important in terms of us understanding what our basal metabolism is? So again, we said basal metabolism was kind of that resting energy expenditure, okay? The most important factor for us to keep in mind is lean body mass. So again, the more lean body mass I have, the more calories I need in order to maintain that lean body mass. Other tissues that are important, liver, brain, kidney. So again, those structures are fairly consistent amongst all people. Okay, so again, the size of my liver versus the size of somebody else's liver, they're probably about the same, right? The size of my brain versus the size of someone else's brain, they're probably about the same, right? So again, not a whole lot of difference when we think about those vital organs. However, muscle mass differs significantly from person to person. So again, that's going to be the primary component to understand the difference between people, how much muscle mass we have. Okay, other factors that are important, gender does make a difference. So again, males tend to have a higher resting metabolism than females. Again, we think that that's generally due to the muscle mass issue. So again, men generally have more muscle mass than females. And so we believe that that's the primary reason, not that there's anything specific about our biology that would make men burn more calories than women. Body temperature is another factor that will make a difference as well. So extreme heat or extreme cold serve as stressors for us. So again, we're going to burn more calories in those situations in order to kind of maintain our body temperature. Thyroid hormone is another example of a component that's important to understand. So again, we can have a hypothyroidism, which means our thyroid's not very active, and that'll decrease our metabolism, or we can be hyperthyroidism, and again, that means that our thyroid is very active or too active, and so that particular type of person maybe has a hard time keeping weight on. They're also always hot. They have a high resting metabolism. Okay. Aspects of the nervous system will also play a role. So again, if I activate my sympathetic nervous system, which is like the portion of my nervous system that I activate when I'm stressed. So again, this system will cause us to burn more calories. Okay, so again, if we're nervous, it will actually increase our metabolic rate. Pregnancy, so again, during the average pregnancy, you need to consume an additional 150 calories per day, and that only starts in the second and third trimester. In the first trimester, you're supposed to just keep doing whatever you were already doing. So again, during pregnancy, we expect metabolism to, I guess, increase is what I'm trying to say, to 150 calories, but it's not, I don't know, it's kind of weird to think about it that way because it's not just your metabolism. Again, you're providing fuel for the baby is basically what you're doing in that scenario. Caffeine and tobacco use will also increase our metabolic rate as well. So again, those are both stimulants for us. So again, they're going to activate that sympathetic nervous system and cause us to increase our energy expenditure. So I want to talk a little bit about when we talk about body types and we talk about this concept of set point. Okay, so the set point theory, I believe I have, I don't know, maybe on the next slide. But again, thinking about this idea of an ideal body weight. And, we got to think about two things. And I think this is super interesting, thinking about nature versus nurture, right? So nature, how I'm raised, how does that play a role in what my body weight is or what my body size is? And then also genetics, right? So those are the two components we need to understand. Is there a genetic reason that I weigh this amount? amount and someone else weighs something else, right? So again, trying to understand how these two components kind of interplay together in order for us to determine what our body weight is, okay? What's unique about trying to separate these two factors out is that we really can't, right? It's very difficult for us to separate these things out because not only do you get your genetics from your parents, you also learn lifestyle habits from them as well. So again, it's very difficult for us to kind of separate these two components out. We do know that both play an important role in understanding what our body weight is. However, it's hard for us to determine how much, one weighs more than the other, if that makes sense. Okay. So in studies where identical twins were raised in separate environments, they show similar weight gain patterns, overall weight, and weight distribution. Now imagine the logistics of doing a study like that, right? So there's not that many people out there that are identical twins to start with, okay? And there are certainly not that many identical twins that have been raised in separate environments, okay? So again, imagine that the number of people that we're looking at are very, very small in this particular type of study. We believe that genes may account for up to 70% of our body weight. I've seen some researchers report something as low as 25%. Okay, so somewhere between 25 and 70% of what we weigh is based on what our genetics are. Again, that's a huge range, right? We know it's important, but we don't know how important. We also inherit specific body types. So again, if mom stores a lot of fat in her hips and thighs, ladies, you're also at a risk to do the same thing. Guys, if dad stores a lot of weight in the area, again, you're also at risk for those types of traits from a genetic standpoint. So I mentioned this concept of set point. So set point theory is basically like this concept that there's a certain weight that your body wants to be, and it'll kind of deviate about 10% either direction, but never more than that, okay? So again, let's say that my set point was 150 pounds. Okay. And let's say I work really hard and I want to lose some weight and I'm, doing a lot of running and I'm lifting weights and I'm eating really good and all this stuff. And I get myself down to 142 pounds. Okay. But I just can't get any lower than that, right? So I'm able to get to that 142, but no matter what I do, I keep exercising more. I've added swimming and I'm lifting one more day and I cut out this afternoon snack and I'm adding more kale to my lunch or whatever it is, right? Doing all these extra things, and I just can't get below that 142 mark. Okay, so again, let's think about it on the other end. Let's imagine that I'm 150 pounds and I decide I want to gain some weight. So I'm adding in all these snacks, like I've added in some trail mix and I'm adding avocado to my eggs that I eat in the morning, and I added a smoothie before bed to, give me some of those extra calories, and I'm lifting a lot and doing all these things, and I get myself up to 157 pounds, right? And then I keep doing more, right? I've added another day of strength training and I'm working really hard in the weight room and I've added a couple more snacks in and those types of things. I just can't get above that level, right? So again, as I kind of start to slack off, I kind of drift my way back to that 150 mark. So again, when we think about this concept of set point, we tend to deviate a little bit, but we want to kind of fall back to that 150 mark. Okay. So some researchers believe that this is it. This is true, and that, our set point is based on our genetics, and it's kind of like a, pre-programmed, and this is what you're supposed to weigh, and it's going to be really difficult to deviate from that particular area. Other researchers are like, no, that's not right. Like, this doesn't make sense. Okay. So again, let's take a look at some of the pros and cons when we think about this concept of set point. So this is a classic study. Again, this would never be approved in today's day and age, but in 1975 it was approved. So they did this overfeeding study, and they took prisoners in Vermont, and so they overfed these people. Okay, so again, these people were given 5,000 to 8,000 calories per day, and they were to do minimal activity. Okay, and they did this for 10 weeks. And these people that they chose to start with were all men. They were all middle-aged, and they had no family history of obesity. Their average weight gain was 36 pounds. Okay, once the study concluded, most of the subjects returned back to their initial weight within a few months. Within 6 months of the study being completed, 87% of these individuals had returned to their original weight. Okay, so certainly with the Vermont prison study, this is in support of this concept of set point. They were able to deviate 36 pounds from their set point, but once they were done with the study, they could return to their normal eating habits, return to their normal activity habits, and they returned back to their original weight, which I think is just crazy. So, again, we think about the set point theory. What's the physiology behind this? So what are the physiological mechanisms that support this? So some researchers suggest that the hypothalamus monitors the amount of body fat that we have and tries to keep that level constant over time, okay? This is one of the reasons why we recommend weight loss to be slow, okay? Because the concept with slow weight loss or slow weight gain is that I could monitor or modify the set point within the hypothalamus. Okay, so when calorie intake is reduced, such as if we're dieting, there's a decrease in the release of thyroid hormone, which reduces my basal metabolic rate. And this can be about 10 to 20%. Okay, so we can see a 10 to 20% drop in our basal metabolic rate as we restrict our calories. So that means that I'm burning 150 to 300 calories less per day. Well, that freaking sucks. Maybe I only wanted to consume 300 less calories per day. Well, now I'm just burning less than that. So that's not that fun, right? So that makes it really difficult for us to lose weight. Okay. Same thing happens when we overconsume in the short term. Okay, so if I overconsume calories in the short term, my thyroid hormone will also increase in order to combat that and allow us to maintain weight. Again, that only works if it's like one day. We can't do that many days over time, or we will see weight gain. So this just kind of shows you a visual of this concept of this new set point. So again, if the set point is within the hypothalamus of the brain, gradual change in our set point will create or replace our original set point. So here you can see on the left, this lady starts really small and then she loses some weight, but then she gains a little more than where she was to start. And that creates a new set point if she stays there for long enough. Okay, so if a person overeats in the short term, basal metabolic rate will increase in order to resist that weight gain. However, in the long run, resistance to weight gain is much less than the resistance to weight loss. Okay, so again, it's easy for us to gain weight. It's difficult for us to lose weight, right? So if a person gains weight and stays at that weight for an extended period of time, a new set point can be established. Okay, so that's what we see in this image is 3 different set points that have kind of gradually increased over time. So again, those are some ideas that would support the set point. Let's think about people that oppose this. And again, it's just simply a theory. There's not, it's not a decided, yes, this for sure is true or not, right? So people that oppose the set point theory, our weight gradually continues to increase each year, even in adulthood. Okay, so the average person gains 0.8 pounds every year if you live in America. Okay, so every American gains an average of 0.8 pounds each year of their lives. So you're born, you're gaining basically like forever, right? That's insane. So if we had a set point, once you got through puberty, you would reach whatever that set point was, and then you would just kind of stay there. We would kind of stay around the same weight as what we were when we were 23, 24, somewhere in that range. But that's not true, right? People are gradually gaining weight over their entire lives. Okay, so our country's set point also continues to increase as obesity continues to grow, right? So again, imagine 1970, our set point was like 30 pounds lighter than what the average set point is now, right? Well, if there is in fact a set point, our genetics haven't changed, right? We've been able to continue to pass these same genes down through generation and generation. So why is the set point getting higher in this country? The other thing that I think is crazy is people from all over the world can move to our country. They could be from Europe, they could be from Africa, they could be from South America, wherever, right? They come to our country and their set points automatically increase. Doesn't matter what their genetic disposition was. Any type of person that moves to our country, on average, gains 12 pounds within the first 6 years of them living here, right? So that's crazy, okay? American dishes, here's just one reason that we believe that this is true in our country. And again, this does not support the set point theory. American dishes are on average 180 calories more than any other country, with 12 extra grams of fat compared to other countries. Okay, so again, when we think about how we eat, we think about the calories that we're bringing in. We're bringing in more calories than people in other countries. And again, that's why obesity is such an issue in our country, or one of the reasons why. So again, this just kind of shows you the increase that we've seen from 1960s. Again, 1960s, we didn't see a whole lot. Now, check it out. We've got a lot of overweight, obese, extremely obese men and women in our country. And again, these are the same genetics. And we've continued to see this rise and rise and rise in our country over time. So, we've talked a little bit about this genetic predisposition, but what about the traits that your parents gave you, right? So again, what are the habits that you have? Okay, so while we may resemble our parents due to the genetics we've inherited, we also inherit lifestyle habits, cultural, diet, activity habits as well, right? So again, think about growing up, or if you're a parent, think about, what is it like when you get home, right? What are the activities that you do? Do you sit on the couch together and you watch the show, right? Or are you out in the yard playing catch? Or are you out going for a bike ride with your family, right? What are those activities like? What were the activities that you did when you were a kid, right? And have you continued to do those? Think about the nutritional thing too, right? When I was growing up, you had to have dessert at every single meal. And so one of my brothers still eats that way, right? You've got to have a cookie every lunch. You got to have, a piece of cake or whatever at dinner. My mom's a big baker. So again, do you maintain those nutritional habits? Okay. We also always, this is so weird because we'd always have dessert, but you always had a fruit and vegetable at every, at dinner and that sort of thing as well. So a lot of home cooked meals and things like that. I grew up, we didn't ever eat out. Okay. So think about those things. Do you still do those things? So now I don't really eat out unless I'm traveling or something else like that. Like we don't really eat out in our family. We don't eat as much desserts as what my parents, what we did when I was growing up. But again, think about all those things that have kind of been passed down, and what have you, what did you grow up doing? Well, I grew up playing basketball in the driveway with my dad and my brothers, right? And so now with our kids, we're out, riding our bikes in the driveway or whatever. So they're not quite big enough to play basketball yet. But so again, you think about those activities as well and how those activities might be passed down. So that's certainly a role with nurture. Another thing to think about is this, we've seen some studies where we look at married couples. And married couples tend to behave similarly towards food and have similar degrees of leanness or fatness. And again, I think that you got to think about this, as compromise, right? So again, maybe you're the person that's super into fitness and wants to eat healthy, and your partner is not really into fitness and they'd be okay with eating Domino's here and there, right? So again, you're going to kind of reach an equilibrium where sometimes you're going to eat the Domino's and watch TV with them, and sometimes you'll get them to go for a walk with you or whatever, right? So again, we'll kind of find that equilibrium with our spouse. Or maybe you're up here and you want somebody up here, and so you've chose somebody who also values exercise and sport and fitness and good nutrition and those types of things. So super interesting to think about those dynamics as well when we think about our spouses and that sort of thing, right? So next we'll kind of take a look at some weight loss techniques that we can use that will be specific for our athletes. Okay, so again, you think about the role of nature and nurture in this idea of set point, and I think at the end of the day, what's most important about this is, we can focus on what we can control. Certainly we cannot control the genetics, right? We can't control who our parents are and what genetics they've given to us, but we can control our activities, we can control our behaviors, right? So again, I think that that's really what the emphasis needs to be on, right? Focus on what you can control, and you can control what foods you put in your mouth, and you can control, how much activity you do, right? So maybe you don't have great genetics, but you can do what you can to maintain a healthy weight and that sort of thing. So I think that that is not only important for each of us to understand, but also an important message that we share with our athletes as well, right? I think that that is a really important thing to make sure our athletes feel in control of, right? So again, focus on what you can control, and some things you can't, and that's okay. Don't worry about that. That's the cards you were dealt, and let's focus on what we can do in order to reach your goals. Okay. So again, we think about how do we help someone to lose weight? How can we do this? So when we think about treatment for people that are overweight or obese, our treatment should be long-term. Okay, so again, we talked about the hypothalamus and how maybe it has this kind of set weight that it wants our body to be at. So, you know, if we kind of gradually lose weight, we can kind of shift that set point if there is a set point. Okay, so again, emphasis should be on healthy, active living, sustainable dietary modifications. So again, I want to make these changes that I can live with for the rest of my life. So, you know, my husband is big into, he's fit and he'll, you know, eat healthy and things like that, but he loves these different fad things. So if you've ever heard of like the 75-day hard or 75 hard or something like that. So it's this like challenge where you have to do, you know, 2 workouts a day and you have to eat clean and no alcohol and all this stuff. Like he loves doing stuff like that. And so he did that this winter, and I just kept saying like, Richard, this isn't sustainable. Like you can't live like this forever, right? Because I like to drink. I want to go to a brewery and have a beer or whatever. So again, we want to think about how can we create a lifestyle that's sustainable, that we can continue to do and we're happy with that, right? So again, we want to think about making kind of long-term changes as opposed to a means to an end. I'm going to lose 30 pounds and then I'm going to go back to the way I was living before. Okay. So again, I think that emphasis is really important. So what do you think is the most important component of a healthy weight loss plan? Now, certainly we need to be doing aerobic exercise. We need to be doing resistance training, and we also need to have some dietary modifications. Okay. So again, we think about what's the most important component of this. It depends on the person, right? What is sustainable for that person? What's going to keep that person happy? But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is just consistency, right? Anyone can eat healthy for one day. Anybody can exercise for a day. Anybody can do that for a week. But can you do it consistently over time? Right? So again, building this lifestyle that's sustainable day after day, week after week, month after month, building that consistency, I think, is the most important component to creating this healthy lifestyle change. So one of those important components that we talked about as it's related to weight loss tactics is creating a calorie deficit. So again, we have to establish a negative calorie balance so that we're spending more calories than we are taking in. So in order for us to lose weight, we need to have a deficit of 3,500 calories. So 1 pound is equivalent to 3,500 calories. So one of the things that we want to do is work on what amount of calories we're bringing in. So some methods for calorie restriction, we could reduce fat intake, we can reduce carbohydrate intake, protein intake, alcohol. Now certainly alcohol is an easy one for us to cut out. Alcohol provides 7 calories per gram, and it doesn't really give us any nutritional value. It is really fun though. So again, when we think about creating a lifestyle that we want to maintain, that's something to certainly keep in mind, right? So, if I were to decide, which of these items I wanted to reduce in terms of creating this calorie deficit, fats, carbohydrates, and alcohol are all, good options for us. A decrease in protein intake isn't generally recommended, particularly not for athletes, because we know proteins are such an important component of, of the athletic performance. So again, how do we control our calorie intake? Again, the goal is to create a healthy lifestyle that's sustainable, okay? So low fat options, low carb options, those both seem to be successful. We have to think about what's feasible for the individual. So for me personally, I really like sweets. I like sugary coffees. I like cookies, those types of things. So for me, reducing carbs wouldn't really be a good option. I have no problems reducing fats. Like I could go the rest of my life without eating a steak. I could go the rest of my life without eating fried food. So I don't really care about those so much, but I like to have sweets. So again, for someone like me, choosing a low carb diet wouldn't be the best lifestyle for me. There's a lot of people that would prefer to have more fats and wouldn't mind reducing their carb intake. So again, we've got to think about what's realistic for the individual. There's not a one size fits all when we think about dieting. So again, that's something that's important. Again, when we're working with athletes, choosing low carb probably isn't ideal when they're in their competitive phase of their season. So again, we want to think about timing with this as well in terms of, what's feasible and when would be appropriate for me to restrict my calorie intake. Okay. So again, both seem to be significant as it relates to significance in weight loss. However, we see that low-fat, high-fiber diets seem to be more successful in terms of maintenance. So again, those seem to be more feasible in the long term, whereas that low-carb diet can be effective in just a short term. So tips for reducing calorie intake, again, we can read nutrition labels. We can use a food tracker. So again, this could be something as simple as just keeping a notebook and writing down what you're eating. You could use, there's so many different trackers out there. So we can use MyFitnessPal or some of those different options so that we can really be cognitive of what we're putting in. Okay, so again, that'll allow people to really take a look and really reflect on what they're consuming. So, when we think about weight problems and we think about this as it relates to general health, we know that, weight loss and being an appropriate weight is important for prevention of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, many of these other chronic diseases. We also know that being an appropriate weight would help us in sport performance. And we also know that there's a link between weight and psychological health as well. So research on people who have weight problems indicate there's also a link between low self-esteem, number one. Number two, negative emotions. So again, feeling negatively in general. Okay. And number three, may have perfectionistic goals based on the ideal self. So again, people have kind of these perfectionistic goals that, make us feel bad that we're not the way that we see that we should be. Okay. So again, having realistic beliefs and goals, positive self-talk and problem solving can help support a healthy lifestyle. So again, when we think about helping our athletes, think about them as a whole person, not just, their sport performance and how they might contribute on your team. We want to think about them and as it relates to their general health and well-being. Okay. So again, what are our, a lot of people will consume calories as part of a stress relief. So in reality, when we think about the stress mechanisms from a physiological standpoint, our physiological response is the opposite. So, you see like, in movies and on TV, oh, so-and-so broke up with so-and-so, and so they're, eating ice cream, or they go out to the bar and have margaritas or whatever, right? So a lot of times our coping mechanisms revolve around calories. And in reality, our physiological coping mechanism is to decrease appetite. So, if there's anybody who's watching this who, when you get stressed, you don't eat or you forget to eat or something like that, that's the physical mechanism. Our learned behavior is to choose ice cream or those comfort foods or alcohol or whatever when we're coping with challenging situations. So again, we want to think about those types of issues and then, try to come up with appropriate coping mechanisms. So again, if we say that ice cream isn't the appropriate way to deal with stress, then what are the appropriate coping mechanisms, and how can we learn those behaviors and really shift our thought process to using a healthier coping mechanism, such as going for a walk or doing yoga or doing something active there, hanging out with friends, something along those lines. So again, when we think about successful weight management, a sense of well-being may result from a well-balanced diet, and this will reinforce our commitment to weight control. So eating good feels good, right? It makes you feel good. It can certainly improve our self-esteem, and then that's kind of, this positive reinforcement that we need in order to continue along that pathway. And again, that can help us to, have some healthier coping strategies as opposed to kind of choosing some of those unhealthy coping strategies. So again, we've spent some time now talking about weight management in general, and now we want to kind of take that information and apply that to our athletes. So let's take a look at how this will apply to our athletes. So why are athletes concerned about weight loss in the first place? Number one, they want to maintain a high power to weight ratio. So again, I want to have the absolute best body composition that I can that will allow me to be the most efficient athlete that I can possibly be. Okay. So again, by losing weight, I have to carry less weight, and in any sport where locomotion is a part of that sport, so I have to move my body from one place to another place, having efficient weight makes me more efficient, makes me more powerful, makes the energy expenditure less so that I can do those movements more often or faster or more frequently, right? So again, we want to keep a high power to weight ratio. Number two, we want to reduce energy expenditure while competing. So again, if I weigh less, it costs me less to move or to do a particular skill. So therefore, I can have more energy to be able to complete that task at a higher power later in the game, right? So again, it would allow me to maintain my intensity later in the game or in the event. Athletes might want to compete at a lower weight class. So again, for some of those weight classification sports, they want to lose weight so that they can compete at a lower weight. And lastly, improved performance, right? In many sports, being small is an advantage, or having, efficient weight is really important as it relates to their overall performance. So I'm thinking about those things. Now, certainly athletes want to lose weight for other reasons, such as body image, or they have this kind of idea of what they should look like because this is what their teammates look like, and I have to be this certain body type in order to be successful in this sport. So we can certainly think about some of those psychological factors as well for our athletes. So when we think about weight loss for athletes, again, the plan should be pretty similar to what we talked about for the average population. We must create a calorie deficit, and again, this can be a couple things. So it can be reducing the calories that we're taking in, but also increasing the calories that we're expending as well. We should shoot for no more than 1 to 2 pounds per week of weight loss. And as we mentioned when we talked about the macronutrients, we want to try to maintain carb and protein intake, particularly during our competitive season. So it would be appropriate to reduce kind of overall calories, but maybe it'd be better to kind of reduce our fat intake as well. Athletes should be, specific about when they want to begin a weight loss plan. The best time to do so would be in their off season. We certainly don't want to start this during their competitive season because it will affect their energy availability. Okay, so some things to think about. We want to emphasize healthful eating patterns. So again, promoting a lot of fruits and vegetables and those types of things. I always tell athletes, focus on what you can add in, not what you're going to take away, right? So if I add in a bunch of fruits and vegetables, I don't feel like I'm depriving myself, and by default, I'm getting healthier calories in than if I thought about like, okay, well, I'm never going to have, Chick-fil-A again, or I'm never going to have Poncheros again, or whatever it is that, that person values or enjoys, right? So again, when we think about decreasing calorie intake, we want to choose low-calorie, nutrient-dense foods. So again, lots of fruits and vegetables are have a large volume but low calorie quantity, if that makes sense. So like watermelon, for example, I could have like a full, and here's my lunch over here, like a full thing of this. This has some spinach and rice and stuff in there, but I could have this full container of watermelon and that'd be like 10 calories, right? So again, it's a large volume, but not a lot of calories. So trying to find those types of foods. decrease our portion sizes. So again, instead of having 3 pieces of pizza, can we back it off and have 2 pieces? Okay. Track calories consumed. Again, we can use some sort of nutrition tracker. I'll have athletes just start with something simple as just write down for me what you're consuming. So again, don't worry about quantities so much. Just write down you had 1 peanut butter and jelly sandwich, 1 apple, etc. That way, so I can get an idea of what they're actually consuming, and then we can look at, look further into that as it relates to portion sizes and things like that. And also increase water intake. So again, what can we do to make sure we're consuming enough fluids? Okay, so we talked a little bit about the ways in which we might reduce their calorie intake. Let's take a look at how we might be able to increase energy expenditure. So we want to make sure we're doing at least 30 minutes moderate aerobic exercise 5 days a week, or 20 minutes vigorous aerobic exercise 3 days per week. That's just the general recommendations for healthy living. And then also at least 2 days of resistance training a week. Turns out most of your athletes are already doing that just with their sports practices. So we need to kind of go above and beyond that. So in order to lose weight, we need to go kind of above and beyond those minimum guidelines. Again, ACSM for weight loss says that we can work our way up to 60 to 90 minutes of exercise 5 days per week. Again, athletes generally aren't having any problems getting the required exercise in, especially if you're a college athlete or a really dedicated athlete. If you go to practice every day, you're able to get that in, right? What are we doing in our off season? So again, those are when those conversations need to take place. Are you still being diligent and consistent about getting those workouts in every day, right? So again, making that a priority is really important. Again, we think about this over the long term. The recommendation is we shouldn't lose more than 5 to 10% of our current body weight over 3 to 6 months. So again, if I'm 150 pounds, for example, 10% of that is 15 pounds. So I shouldn't lose more than 15 pounds over a 6-month period of time. Again, as we mentioned, a good goal is around 1 pound per week. We don't want to exceed 2 pounds per week. And the reason for that is, we think about this, that set point theory that we talked about, and in order for that set point theory to really shift and our body to become more comfortable at a particular weight, we need to do so gradually. Okay. Weight loss goals should be based on BMI for non-athletes, but it would be much better for us to look at body fat percentage for our athletes. Because again, if we're doing resistance training and working hard in our workouts, are we gaining muscle mass? And so muscle weighs more than fat. So if we're gaining muscle mass, it's not so much about the number on the scale. It's more about the quality of weight that you have. Okay. We can monitor our body fat percentage every about 8 weeks. Again, when we think about the methods for body fat percentage, like the skin folds or the bioelectrical impedance are the 2 that I talked about in this lecture. So, we think about the level of error with either of those measures. If we do it more often than every 8 weeks, it's highly likely that the error level is more what we see in comparison to an actual change. So doing it every 8 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks is a good place for us to start in terms of monitoring body fat percentage. So here, let's take a look at kind of the pros and cons here. So again, extra weight or fat can be detrimental to physical performance. So we know that that's true for particular athletes. Again, particularly when we have extra body mass that we need to move, whether that's jumping or running or whatever type of movement you do in your sport, carrying extra weight costs me more energy, which means I'm going to get worn out before some of my competitors would. Okay. However, weight loss isn't always a good thing for athletes. And again, this is kind of a slippery slope. We think about, eating disorders and distorted body image and those types of things. So a reduction in body weight could also cause a reduction in muscle mass. So again, you run that risk, especially if you're not careful here and you restrict your calories too much, of losing some muscle mass. Okay. So again, if I'm losing fat mass, if I'm losing muscle mass, am I less powerful? So am I able to am I slower? Am I not as strong, right? So again, what am I losing if I lose muscle mass? It may also include a reduction of glycogen stores as well. So again, we think about those energy systems and, if I create this pretty severe calorie deficit, it could reduce my glycogen stores, which again might leave me feeling fatigued and not able to continue that exercise bout with ease, you know, kind of later in the workout or whatever. Okay. Excess weight loss can be associated with chronic fatigue. And again, if we're experiencing chronic fatigue and kind of those overtraining symptoms because I'm not fueling myself appropriately, that's going to put me at risk for injury. Okay. Also eating disorders. That's another thing to really be aware of with our athletes. So again, those are some things to kind of think about here. Just a couple last slides here to take a look at as it relates to weight classification sports. So some examples include wrestling, martial arts, rowing, boxing, horse racing, or jockey. So again, you know, these types of athletes really face a unique challenge as it relates to cutting weight. So again, a couple just comments on weight cutting here in the next slide. So again, athletes that participate in these weight classification sports are trying to perform better in a lower weight class. So again, they cut weight to gain a competitive edge over their competition. You can check out this YouTube video that kind of describes a little bit about what weight cutting looks like if you're not familiar with kind of how that works for particular sports. Again, lastly, when we think about these weight classification sports, they're at a higher risk for using weight loss measures that are unhealthy. So again, if they've got to cut 10 pounds in 1 week or in 3 days or whatever, they're going to use some rapid weight loss measures. And again, a lot of that is water weight. So again, with dehydration, we do put ourselves at risk for some potential issues with electrolyte imbalance, could be, you know, cramping, inability to mentally focus, decreased stamina, hypoglycemia, fatigue, and then some other maybe more severe symptoms, a decrease in cardiovascular function, renal function, and issues with thermal regulation as you become dehydrated. So again, those are kind of some of the potential issues that we see with unhealthy weight loss strategies.